Welcome to Simplexity podcast series. Today we have Charles Bonfante, a general manager from New Zealand, working for Fujitsu and helping people in getting better in their businesses. And over and above, recently he has mentored some of his team members on a very specific topic which is closer to his heart and what we all go through in our lives the moment something hits on our face. Am I good enough? Or imposter syndrome. With that, I welcome my good friend Charles Bonfante to help us understand more about am I good enough and see his views on how to get better. Charles, welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. And just in terms of the introduction as well, just a bit of a brief bio on me. I've been working within the consulting industry now for possibly about 30 years plus. So I've been around. A lot of my career I spent in Europe, and I worked in the UK, in Spain, in France, in Germany, and Italy. And I was resident in all those places. Very much working for large IT corporations like IBM, Cisco, Intel, and essentially just evolved in my career. Always enjoyed talking to customers about business problems and trying to find solutions for them, and working as part of large teams in a wide variety of different roles. And for the last 13 years, I've been in New Zealand, and I've spent a great deal of that time working in two of the big four firms, and also I spent quite a bit of time at Microsoft as well, working within the business application space. And more recently, Daniel, my role is for the last year and a half as a general manager for Fujitsu New Zealand. So happy to be here, Daniel, and looking forward for the discussion.
Thanks a lot. That's an amazing introduction. I did not do so professionally. Charles, we have been going through in our business, and we have seen in our businesses many times they're real great people, but then we see they're underperforming or having the doubt in themselves. And finally, we come across something called as, am I good enough for doing that? So in your journey, you have seen various countries, lived in various countries and seen a lot of people. And especially when you're dealing with clients and dealing with this multi-million-dollar deals and talking to the people, how do you see this as one of the biggest challenge, and what are your thoughts around that?
Look, I think my experience, Daniel, fundamentally, people are quite similar. I think when you meet people for the first time or you work with people, everybody tends to have a sense of values and things that are important to them. So there's a generalization. Everybody has families and connections and relationships. So for me, I've always tried to recognize that there is commonality between us, irrespective of where we come from, where we work, what our cultures are. Especially in the world of business, there is essentially goals that people want to be happy doing what they do, and they want to have a sense of confidence and accomplishment and make an impact. So I think generally most people are like that, and for that reason, then we all want to be the best versions of ourselves. And you're right, there are occasions where you are in environments or you are working with people where you feel a sense that you're not the right person, or there is some kind of knowledge in you that you don't feel that you have in order to contribute or make an impact. And I see it quite often, and it does happen. And I think many people approach it in different ways. But in my experience, I think the best way to overcome a sense of not feeling that you're up to it, or you're not the right fit, or there's something is, I think for me, the trick has always been to try and ask questions. I think people just really genuinely want to understand or want to acknowledge that you're listening to them. And I think many times where you feel that you probably don't have the right skill set, I think one of the get out clauses are definitely to ask some questions that can flesh out an opinion. And most of all, I think lots of people do just want to be respected as human beings, right? Irrespective of the industry or what they're doing, they genuinely just want to feel a sense of respect, that they're giving you a particular amount of time, and you also got to give those people respect that you're there for the right reasons, and you have a targeted conversation about it as well, Daniel. So it's and I think, the whole concept and the whole frame of imposter syndrome as well is what gives me comfort, is that everybody suffers from it, right? It's not everybody in every profession that I've ever met always has an element of feeling that sense of insecurity, because that's what it comes down to. Imposter syndrome, it's your own personal sense of insecurity, and how you deal with that is quite personal. Some people deal with it in other ways. I deal with it by asking questions and just trying to connect with somebody on a personal level. That seems to work for me.
Yeah. So can imposter syndrome impact professionally and personally?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you let it get to you in a sense that it detracts you from what your objectives are, and that you feel that sense of insecurity that I was talking about, that makes you feel that you're somehow out of balance in a particular conversation or in a particular scenario, then yes, I think it can, and I've seen it absolutely impact you professionally and personally, because people react to it in different ways. You can suffer from imposter syndrome, and you can spin it to a positive by asking questions and building on relationships. So there's one way that you can actually counter it. But if you are a bit more introvert and you take things a little bit more personally, it can be really detrimental, because you kind of feel your insecurities as a personal insult on you, and it can have a very detrimental effect to your personal and professional life, undoubtedly.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. There, it's really important knowing the person, because the thing is, in a busy life, what we do is, we see someone struggling in their life, or at work, we just pass by. We have a beautiful saying like, "How you been?" And even before he answers, we are moving away from that place. So your way of sitting down and asking questions and trying to understand where the person is struggling, and that makes a real comfort, especially in a corporate world, and where it's not all the time, it's not winning, it's more than that. So thank you for sharing that. Especially, how would you think, like, some of the strategies? For example, I had the experience of coming from a pure consulting company to advisory company, and then moving to one more advisory company. There are a lot of people, they are going around in this space, right? So where and how they could prepare themselves in being in a different role and trying to deliver to the customers in such a way that the company who is hiring them is making a right decision.
I reflect on my career, and I remember very early on my career, and I've told this story to a few people that I mentor, and I've had sessions on it, and it's actually quite interesting for me. One of the things that has always helped me is a lesson that I say a mentor, a coach, but one of my first employers advised me on, especially when I was working at IBM many years ago. And he wasn't a particularly pleasant person, but he did give me a bit of advice that I always remembered. And he said to me, I was in my early 20s, I was very nervous and apprehensive when I was meeting customers. I was feeling that imposter syndrome sense, because I always felt that I was going to be asked a question that I didn't know the answer to. And I was a graduate, came out of university, I was naive, my feelings were completely normal. And he did say to me one day that, and it always gave me a sense of comfort, and it was, that there's only 3 answers to any question. There's only 3. And he explained it like this. He says, somebody can ask you a question whether the sky is blue or the water is wet, and it's a fact, and you know the answer. So there's those kind of questions that you absolutely know what the answer is. And then the second question is that can be asked is something that you know something about, but you're dangerous enough to have a conversation about it. So if somebody asks you your opinion about something politically, for example, and you have an opinion that's validated. So you probably don't have the actual answer, but you've got enough that you can have a good discussion about it, or you have a place to start. And then the third type of question is a question that you have absolutely no answer to, which at that age it was probably more like me and probably like I am today. And he said, for those questions, you work for IBM, so you always have a person who has an answer to that question, so you can always get back to the customer with an answer. And once I ingested that, it helped me in my whole career, because I always knew I could walk into any meeting and I either knew the answer, sort of knew the answer, or I could bring the conversation back home and get an answer from somebody else. And I think that was probably one of the best lessons I've ever learned, because it helped alleviate my sense of feeling like an imposter, because I realized I had the answer to every question. I might not have had it there and then, but I would certainly commit to delivering an answer for that particular customer in a particular scenario. So that's something that helped me, was, especially during my career, was understanding the fact that I wasn't on the hook to actually have an answer to every question. But then what I learned through my career was you had to be committed to getting the right kind of answers and building that relationship with the customer. So if you said you were going to get an answer to something, you will. And that was it. And I'll find the answers and I'll follow up with the customer. I'll make sure that they were happy and that relationship happened. So yeah, that was an important sort of pivotal point in my learning, Daniel, was understanding that I was not the center of the universe. Nevertheless, I always had opportunities to help people, and it might not be there and then, right? It could be 10 minutes after the call or the day after. There was comfort there.
Yeah, you had a great mentor when you started your career.
No, he wasn't. It was the only advice he ever gave me that was valuable. Trust me. The rest of it was a horror show. It was not. And it's ironic, I've worked with much better people in my life, and I can't remember very much what they taught me, but I do remember that particular individual who wasn't particularly pleasant, but he did give me that amazing advice.
Yes. That's an amazing way of looking into it. You don't have to answer everything. You don't have to know everything under the sun. You will learn over a period of time, and if you don't know, it's fine. It's fine. If you don't know, it's fine. You can learn and get back to them telling that, yes, Mr. Client, this is how we could solve the problem, right? That's a very good approach. When we are going through this process, if we are not following something, right? I mean, for example, the previous example, you had 3 options which we can. What happens if a person doesn't do any of these things? Where is he heading in his life, and what will happen to him if he knows there is a benefit for him to adapting something and getting benefit out of it, or he goes in the same path? So where will he head to if he doesn't look at the benefits of other side of getting out of the other side?
There's a saying that says control the controllables, and I've always believed that anybody in their career, if you want to succeed or you want to grow in your role, fundamentally you have to have an instinct or an ability or a desire to learn. If you don't learn, or you don't want to grow or improve yourself, unfortunately you're doomed to kind of live inside of a particular box, and it becomes your choice that you become very defensive around what you know, with no ambition to learn anything particularly new. And I find that those people tend to reside in one space in time, and they tend to sort of fulfill their career just not really moving, just staying very containerized. And I think it really hinders their growth and their ability to actually learn something new, or or do something outside of their comfort zone. I don't see any, if you're not willing to take a chance and you're not willing to learn something new and you're not willing to understand humility and vulnerability and accept the fact that you don't know the answer to every question, then I fear for the future and careers of those individuals, because it's fundamental. Without that ambition and that willingness to learn and that willingness to lose, because I think that's the nub of it, to be honest with you, Daniel. I think, imposter syndrome comes down to obviously insecurities and kind of finding your place. But I think it's dovetailed with a fear of failure. I think people just do not want to fail. And they see that if there's ever a scenario where they feel that they might fail, then it becomes bigger than it is. And I think if people just accepted the fact that they will fail, but the benefits of failing is to learn from that failure and make you a better person, I think it's a mindset, and it's really hard if somebody doesn't want to get out of that mindset. I fear for that person's future, because I don't see how they can grow. I think it's extremely challenging.
Yeah, thank you for that particular point, Charles. I think during my career, many times, and moved across the companies and moved across the world, the only thing which helped me keep going is having mentors or friends like you around and helping me to do and experiment things like some of the projects what we did together, and the openness in feedback and getting there and being there, telling that yes, I am there, go ahead and do it, we'll see what happens. That was a great thing, at least in my career. There are a lot of people who has done that, and that is an important thing. If one doesn't want to do it, and if doesn't want to change, nothing can be done, right? So cool. I think we are heading in a real great conversation, and we are looking at finishing off in a different note. I want to understand, when you have to coach someone, and you have to start with someone telling that, um, okay, I come to you and say, okay, can you please help me out? So what are the few things you want me to do, and how do I start? What is the mechanism you would suggest uh, I should be doing, so that I get better from where I am?
There's a few things. In my experience, what's always worked is when have had people that are working for me, Daniel. So if it's somebody that I'm directly responsible for, then I can really put myself in a position where I am directly exposed to them, or I'm responsible for them, or I have some kind of embedded investment in them being a better version of themselves. That's always worked. I think if you're mentoring somebody that you don't work with or you don't have a connection with, it can be quite difficult, because it can be different, because there is no cause and effect around what they do and how it impacts you. So I think that's important. I think you can do it both ways, but for me, I've always found it far more effective if it's somebody that works with me and is close to me. And in terms of starting, I always find it's a good way to start is to give that person confidence, the mentee confidence that you've got their back, that you're giving them a bit of a green card to try things or think in a way that they probably wouldn't think of previously, and just experiment, and just let that person know that you've given them leeway to do that. And that gives them a lot of confidence. I think that always works. And you can always say, look, just give it a go, just try something, and let's discuss it, and let's learn from it. And it's a difficult thing from a leader's perspective. Most leaders tend to take the path of least resistance, and they tend to make the decisions themselves, because in a business world, it can be far more conducive for speed and accuracy, right? To make the decisions yourself. But any high-performing team or any leader, they need to recognize that it's not just one player that plays in a football team, right? It's a team effort. And I've learned in my career, that you really need to empower and you need to support the people around you, because essentially that's what makes success, is everybody working together. So I think confidence is key, and giving people reassurance and those individuals reassurance that they can fail and you're there to pick them up. And also giving boundaries that says, hey, look, we're going to try something and I'm going to give you free reign to give something a go. But what I want from you is the opportunity to learn with you about what was successful or what didn't go right as well. So it's a bit of a two-way street. You need to give people leeway, but you also need to open up the door and give them the opportunity to learn with you. That's super important as well. And I think as well, one of the things I always suggest to people is try to turn the dial and try and be proactive. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I've learned in my career is if you're answering an email or you're doing anything, most people would reply to something with, hi Daniel, can you do X, Y, and Z? And the answer is, typically the answer is, no, Charlie, I can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. And that's the conversation. And I always try to encourage people to say, always try to be proactive. If you can't do something, make a suggestion or be proactive, or change your mindset as to always be trying to make an impact. The last thing you want is somebody to ask you a question and for you to say, no, I can't do it, leave it there. You kind of want to generate that. So I try to change people's mindsets to always try and be proactive and answer an email with a suggestion or a bit of insight, because that's valuable. So yeah, those are the two things. I think it's about giving people leeway and confidence that you're there to pick them up when they fail, because invariably they will, and that's natural. And I think the second part is encourage a proactive mindset. Make sure that people no longer sit in their box and don't stretch the boundaries. Give them flexibility to make suggestions and just explore their mind and be a bit more creative. I think that's super important.
Thank you, Charles. I think this is, again, I made notes of what you said. Very simple and simple strategies to follow. Giving the confidence for the person, telling that, yes, I'm here for you, and giving that flexibility, and also telling them what the boundaries are, then letting him do what he can do and fail within those limits, within the professional. It's an very, very, I could say, process which could not go wrong, because the thing is, like, you're putting the boundaries there, you're telling you go and do whatever you want to do. If you fail, I'm here. So this strategies, I think, should be very clearly utilized by the people, those who are willing to learn and get better.
But it is that there are challenges to that as well, Deepak. What I've noticed in my career, and it especially happens through individuals who have been exposed to certain cultures, whereby, there's that whole theory of nurture versus nature, right? We are a product essentially of our environment. And I work with a lot of people in different regions, and I find there's a very fascinating cultural divide around people who've worked in particular regions, who've had bosses or management systems and worked in professional services where they've been so constrained their whole life, their whole career, they've never been able to make an independent decision whatsoever. Everything they've done has been scheduled, programmatic, measured with KPIs. They've never been given that leeway to make those independent decisions. Their minds are not programmed to do it. And that can be a real challenge, because no matter how much as a mentor you give somebody that free rein, it's almost as though they don't believe you, because they've been burned or they've had some really bad leaders in the past. So I think culture and nurture and where people have come from is a massive impact. It doesn't work for everybody, Deepak. It's quite, Daniel, it's quite tough, mate. It's not it's tough. It's just a hard way to do it. It doesn't work on everyone, Deepak.
Yeah, I go with the analogy that if it is free and easy, it means that there is no more benefit out of it, right? So it has to be challenging, but then it should be simple to do it. Then
It
at
could
the end
be.
of the day, yeah, go
It
ahead.
could be. But no, the point I'm trying to say is, I guess what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is, it's easier for some people than others, and that's dependent on where you've been brought up and your culture. And I think that's environment is really key to this as well. We shouldn't think people are all the same. You know, there are different mindsets, especially depending where you come from. That's the kind of the point I was trying to make. It's not one size fits all, right? It's a tough thing
No,
to get right.
yes, you're right. You're right. One size doesn't fit any time to anyone. So that's fantastic. And four great points to learn today, Charles. And yeah, I something I could incorporate myself, especially when I'm looking at uh, the nurturing versus nature. So something which take away for me, how it could change the way we talk to people and we deal with the people. And maybe this is the last one which I want to understand. How does the personal life, mean to say the families and friends around them, would help someone going through this process? So, what is that few things friends and families should be helping someone who wants to get better in this space?
I think it comes down to vulnerability. What I've been learning more recently, and I say recently, it's probably the last, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years. I've only recently realized the power of vulnerability and humility, and I think it's so important because it's something that once you recognize it and you accept it, it becomes a strength. And many times I've been in rooms with colleagues and friends and customers and clients, and when you admit something, or when you acknowledge the fact that you are not knowledgeable about something in a particular way, or you've got something wrong, it gives you a real amazing superpower, because that moment in time, the person you're speaking to always also recognizes the fact that they have an experience in that space, but they haven't been honest enough to admit it. And it's like, I don't know, people who have addiction and they say, hey, I'm an alcoholic. The moment they admit that they're an alcoholic is the path to recovery, right? That's how the saying goes. And I think it's the same around imposter syndrome and feeling that sense of I'm not good enough. Is that the moment you share it and you acknowledge it, it almost gives you a bit of a superpower, because everybody latches onto it, because it's probably a discussion that most people recognize within themselves, but they don't have the ability to communicate it. And it's almost as though you're ahead of the curve because you've gone and said, hey, I'm suffering from this. Have you ever experienced it? And then all of a sudden people open up. So I have no doubt that once you share your feelings and your thoughts with your family and your friends and your colleagues, I think the majority of them would acknowledge it, and they would appreciate the fact that you were vulnerable, and they'll be in a perfect position to support you and give you advice, or even put an arm around you and say it's particularly normal. So yeah, I think it's really beneficial to share it. I really do. And I think the power of sharing and showing that element of vulnerability shouldn't be undermined. It's helped me in my career tenfold, of showing people that I need the help, or I'm just genuinely not knowledgeable about something, or I want to learn more. So yeah, I think it's a superpower. I think people should absolutely explore it. What have you got to lose, right? And I think that's the point. It comes down to failure as well, because if you were to spin it in another way, most people who are quite introvert or who don't want to share probably see vulnerability as a weakness. And that in itself is something that people need to acknowledge that it actually isn't. But then again, it's like anything, sometimes you're in the corporate world and there's a bunch of people around you who are playing personas, or they're trying to be people that they're not, and they're trying to uphold a particular perception in front of a corporate board. So it's difficult. It really is. But I do think there's a level of maturity with it as well. I do believe that the older you become, the more acceptable it is that you can admit these kind of things and be a bit more forward with it. And obviously, if you're more senior, it gives you a little bit more leeway to kind of give it acceptable. But you've got to start somewhere. And I think starting from the top and showing the fact that you're vulnerable as a leader, and especially if you want to develop a high performing team and you need people to kind of jump on board and support you and you want to succeed together, you absolutely need to show those traits and share the fact that you're feeling these emotions. We're all emotional creatures, right? We're all, you know, and one of the things that annoy me most is when you hear people say, no, it's not personal, it's, you know, it's business, it's not personal. It's not. Everything is personal. Everything is based on emotions, right? And that's the truth. And this is just another thing that's an emotional thing that we need to deal with in life. Nothing wrong with it. It's completely normal and it applies to our personal and business world, same as it is.
Yeah, that's fantastic way you concluded, Charles. I think what you said is phenomenal. Especially, it is there, and we need to accept it is there, and be vulnerable and humble on that. Show the humility and get there, and there is a world around you to help and take you to the next level. With that, we are coming to the end of our series. I think this is a topic which we can go around on and on and on, but
You
then
could. You could.
yeah. So Charles, thanks a lot, and it's an amazing talking to you and learning from you every time we speak. Thank you. I think we are not finished here. We'll have a few more in our way to discuss. Thanks a lot for your time.
You're very welcome. Anytime, Deepak.